Matilda soon became as influential in England as she had been in Normandy, and she wielded enormous power and wealth. And there is testament to that in my favourite place that isn't the Tower, and that's the National Archives in Kew, West London, where its most famous item is Domesday Book. This colossal survey of England that William commissioned to find out how much his new kingdom was worth, effectively, who owned what, how much the land was worth. And this shows just how much of a landowner Matilda was. So she was an incredibly powerful woman. Well, by the 1070s, William had brought England under control. There'd been the sort of harrying of the north, this brutal time when William sort of ordered the burning of villages and towns and the slaughter of the population. He went to such extreme measures to bring Yorkshire under control and other parts of the kingdom. So he had finally secured England by the beginning of the 1070s. But it's during that decade that other things start to fall apart for William, and in a rather unexpected way, because trouble starts close to home for William. His son Robert, Curthose, he of the short trousers, doesn't get on with William. It's very, very clear he's his mother's favourite. His father can't stand him. And I think there's this tradition I noted when I was writing a full history of the monarchy, that fathers and sons often don't get on, fathers and eldest sons, because it's almost like, you're kind of seeing your death in your son and what's going to happen after you. So relations can be quite tense, and they certainly were between William and Robert. And Robert always wanted more power than William was prepared to give him. And I think, to be fair to Robert, he had a point. William was struggling to hold on to power in both England and Normandy. So Robert was constantly petitioning William, look, make me Duke of Normandy. I can be Duke there while you focus on England. But William didn't trust him. He thought he was feckless. And on William's side were Robert's younger brothers, William and Henry, who were not very nice to their elder brother Robert. And things came to a head. And I love how relatable this is, because basically there's a massive row between the siblings, and William and Henry play a trick on Robert one day by throwing the contents of a chamber pot over his head. And Robert goes off in a fury. He demands justice from his father, William, who thinks the whole thing's hilarious and refuses to back him up. And it is literally the chamber pot incident that leads to Robert launching a rebellion against his father. And it comes to blows, as we see depicted here, when actually father and son fight each other in hand-to-hand combat during a battle in Normandy. And it's said that Robert could have dealt the killer blow on his father, but either he didn't recognise him, that's according to one chronicle, or he flinched from actually this extreme action of killing his own father. So he fled the battle and spent a long time in exile. But, and this is when it really becomes like The Sopranos, or I don't know, the Real Housewives of whatever, but a real domestic crisis here, because actually it's bad enough that son had rebelled against father, but then it was discovered that Matilda had been funding her son's rebellion against her own husband. So this gets really rather interesting now. And you can imagine that marital relations aren't particularly harmonious at this point. When William discovers Matilda's treachery, he's determined to put her to death. He loves her, he adores her, he can't believe she's betrayed him. And he upbraids her in front of the whole court. But Matilda is quick thinking, and she's very eloquent. She goes down on bended knees in front of the court and begs William to forgive her. And she said, I was only acting as a loving mother, as any mother would do for their son, trying to help him kill his father, that sort of thing. But William sort of falls for it. He at least spares Matilda's life, but he deprives her of power from that day forward. And it's really obvious now that power had been Matilda's lifeblood, and she can't live without it. Her health starts to falter. She'd always been this very robust, resilient woman, despite having given birth possibly 11 times and constantly travelling, and yet she'd always been very physically fit. But now she's no longer regent in either England or Normandy. Now she's not allowed any share of power. Her health starts to ebb away, and it's quite sad. You see in her accounts of number of kind of payments to apothecaries and physicians. We don't know what she's suffering from, but suddenly, as I say, her health is starting to fail. And in 1083, Matilda moves back to Normandy, and she dies on the 2nd of November. And you see her very simple but very beautiful tomb there in the abbey that she had ordered back in 1059, the Abbey aux Dames, which I can't recommend highly enough. I visited it in March this year, and it is just so exquisite. And you can visit the William's Abbey at the same time. There's so much Norman history still in Caen. Well worth a visit. And she's buried here, as I said. Well, William, sort of too late, is consumed by grief. And it's a real sort of tragic end to their marriage, because he couldn't bring himself to forgive her earlier, perhaps understandably, given the scale of her crime against him. But now he was completely inconsolable at the loss of his beloved consort, whom he said he had loved as his own soul. And it was said that from that time forward, the king abandoned pleasure of every kind. He mourned Matilda for the rest of his days. By the way, she was about 52 years old when she died, which depressingly was considered really old for the time. So it was considered to have had a good innings, we might say. Well, Matilda's achievements as Duchess of Normandy and Queen of England had been considerable. She'd carved out a position of power and influence in the male-dominated political arena of both countries. You see a statue here to Matilda that you can find in Paris today. But as well as the authority and the influence that she'd wielded in her lifetime, she'd carved out this inspiring new position for future Queen's consort, the likes of Eleanor of Aquitaine there, and also Isabella, the so-called she-wolf of France, the consort of Edward II. Because before then, royal wives had been expected to just fill the nursery with heirs and spares. But Matilda had been a force to be reckoned with on the political stage as well. And as I said, I think she inspired future generations. So I'm really putting in a pitch for her here today to be remembered, because we know perhaps more about Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was also, by the way, rebelling against her husband on the side of her sons, and Isabella, she-wolf of France. We know about her. If you've watched Braveheart, then you'll know all about her. And we know a lot less about Matilda, the woman who inspired it. And yet her influence over the English monarchy would far outlive both her and her immediate heirs, because her bloodline would continue for more than 1,000 years. All sovereigns of England and the United Kingdom are directly descended from this remarkable woman, including our current King, Charles III. They all can trace their descent from Matilda. Well, after Matilda's death in 1083, as I said, her husband William grieved very deeply for her, but unfortunately grief soon turned brutal, as you might imagine, with William. He took it out on his opponents. It was said that he became a thorough tyrant from that day forward, without Matilda's sort of more benevolent influence here in England. And the Anglo-Saxon chronicles record how this was almost the worst time of William's rule here in England. Well, he died in 1087. He died actually whilst fighting the French over the Channel. And his legacy, though, I think, had been every bit as profound as Matilda's, because he had established this mighty dynasty, this cross-channel dynasty that would endure for many years to come. And in fact, you know, for even after the Normans, kings of England and queens of England still styled themselves kings and queens of France because of the territory they'd once held over in Normandy and other parts of France. And as well, of course, William had left an architectural legacy that was really rather splendid. And this, I did debate about this in my final slide here. I thought I probably should show a picture of the tower. But I'm from Lincoln. And I couldn't resist, because this is one of the finest Norman cathedrals in the world. I'm going to go for the world, not just in England. And really, it I think shows, you know, we're not just talking about London, we're talking about the whole country that really the Norman dynasty put its stamp on. Norman castles, cathedrals, and of course, here at the Tower of London, perhaps the greatest example of all. So I've talked very much about the foundation of the Norman dynasty. As I said, it would endure. Two of William's sons would rule after him, William Rufus and then Henry I, that boy born on Yorkshire soil and the one who would perhaps be the most successful of all.